Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we got a super special video today, so you're probably used to this by now. Every set, when we get a new set, we like to talk about the best cards for different formats, and today is Commander Day, which means, of course, I'm joined by Tomer. How you doing today, Tomer?
I'm doing well, Seth. How are you doing? I'm excited.
I'm excited too. I always have a blast talking about the new Commander cards. It's always such a fun video. I look forward to this one. As soon as Ixalan released and we did this video, I'm like, all right, only like 3 more months and we get to do this again.
I also noticed in a lot of the comments sections when people were spoiling cards, there was a lot of sarcastic comments like, oh, Wizards of the Coast is making another Commander Standard set. And I'm like, yes, sweet, Commander Standard set. This is what I'm here for.
So what do you think? Is this another Commander Standard set? How good is this set? Being a small set, not having as many cards as Ixalan or a big set, is this still like a really good set for Commander? Pretty good? Poor?
Well, I think the way that Rivals of Ixalan is set up is it's trying to push certain archetypes, and these are tribal archetypes. These are your dinosaurs, your vampires, or merfolk, and in that regard, I think Rivals of Ixalan brings a lot to the table to the Commander for those specific tribes. And outside of that, we still have a couple good cards that are probably going to make a splash in different archetypes. Notably, we have more sweet flip lands, and we have other weird niche cards that I'm excited to talk about that are going to fit in like specific commanders. So that's always cool to see. But overall, it's a tribal set, and it's going to be focusing on raising the bar for at least 3 of the tribes, I would say.
Before we jump into it, starting with some sweet tribal cards, just wanted to make it clear that this is kind of cards we like for Commander. So if you're looking for like a super spiky list of like, this is the absolute best card, the most competitive card, that's not really what we're going for. This is more cards that we like, and I think that's kind of in the spirit of the Commander format. You play cards that you like to play, and these are the cards that we like. So any other thoughts on the list in general before we jump into it, Tomer?
Honestly, if I had it my way, I would do like a top 20 list so I could go over all the, like, or at least the vast majority of cards I like. This is just like a little slither of the cards that I like, just the top tip of the iceberg, if you will. But you know, this is a video and we don't want to talk about it for an hour. We wanted to keep it relatively short, even though I always ramble on like this. But yeah, if you want a more in-depth review, I always do a Commander written out review. 2-part article series is going to be coming out this week, so check that out for a more extensive review. This is just kind of a snippet.
Well, with that in mind, let's jump right into it, and we're going to start off, probably where we should start off, talking about the tribes with a whole cycle of cards that support the tribes from Rivals of Ixalan, and that is the Forerunner cycle. So we got Forerunner of the Coalition, Forerunner of the Empire, of the Heralds, of the Legion. So this is kind of like the Harbinger cycle that we saw back in Lorwyn, except updated for the tribes from Ixalan. So, Tomer, what do you think about the Forerunner cycle for Commander?
I think it's definitely based on the Harbinger cycle from Lorwyn. You can see that the converted mana cost of this Forerunner cycle is a little bit more expensive, and that's because they have this enter the battlefield tribal trigger. And I think all of these cards are fantastic just off the bat of their tutoring ability, because in a 99 card singleton format, tutors are very good, and all of these tutor, put it on top of your library, all good stuff. And in terms of enter the battlefield effects, some of them are better than others, but they're all of them are quite good and kind of push the theme of the tribe. So, for example, starting off the Forerunner of Coalition for pirates, whenever a pirate enters the battlefield under your control, each opponent loses a 1 life. That, to me, is basically the most powerful of the triggers if you can build it a certain way. And the way you should build it is probably going to be some sort of infinite combo. Basically, having a pirate enter the battlefield under your control infinite times, so all your opponents lose 1 life, and you immediately win the game. I'm not sure off the top of my head how those combos are going to come to be. It has to be pirate, like, it has to involve pirates, but I'm sure they're out there, and it's going to be a very potent effect.
Yeah, I think that Forerunner of the Coalition definitely has some potential. I'm also not sure about the actual combo. Like you said, there probably is a combo out there, but I think it has potential to be one of the stronger of the when another pirate or when another whatever enters the battlefield abilities out of the whole cycle. I also think our next Forerunner, Forerunner to Empire, has a great ability for its tribe as far as dinosaurs are concerned, with an easy way to repeatedly trigger all your enraged dinosaurs.
Oh yeah, I think I have the right combo card for this one as well. So whenever a dinosaur enters the battlefield, it pings each creature, and obviously this works very well with the dinosaur keyword Enrage. Whenever a dinosaur with Enrage takes damage, it triggers some sweet ability, and obviously you want to be just throwing in cool enraged dinosaurs with this, but the one that really comes to mind is Polyraptor. So you play Forerunner of the Empire, you tutor a Polyraptor, you play Polyraptor, and then suddenly the Polyraptor comes into play, it takes damage, it produces another token that's a copy of Polyraptor, it takes damage, this effect happens 3 times until Forerunner of the Empire dies, or you give it indestructible somehow, and then it goes almost infinitely if you wish. So it can get out of control really, really fast. But even if you're not trying to combo off with Forerunner of the Empire, it's still a really, really powerful piece in the dinosaur tribe.
Yeah, it seems super sweet with Polyraptor. I think that'll be a really fun combo to kind of close out the game with your dinosaur deck. And like you said, even if you're just pinging your Ripjaw Raptor to draw an extra card, ramping with, oh man, I never remember the name of the 3-mana get a land
Ranging
one.
Raptors.
Yeah, there's a lot of like decent enrage abilities, and there was a lot in Rivals of Ixalan, so it's a lot more practical now to not just build dinosaurs in general, but build like an enraged sub-theme dinosaur deck in Commander, because I feel like we just didn't have enough enrage cards in an absolute sense after Ixalan, but now with all the new ones, including 2 new mythics, we got the white mythic as well that exiles a creature whenever it takes damage. There's a lot of good enraged dinosaurs now, so what about the other 2? I don't think the enter the battlefield ability on either of these is all that appealing. Like, your Forerunner of the Herald just kind of grows, your Forerunner of the Legion grows something, but only until end of turn. So I feel like that ability ranks behind the black and red members of the cycle, but still, I mean, a tutor is a tutor, right? You can't really complain about putting this in your Merfolk or your Vampire deck.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with you that the enter the battlefield abilities of the tribal enter the battlefield abilities of these 2 cards are definitely weaker than the red and black ones. Especially with Forerunner of the Heralds, it just puts a +1/+1 counter on itself. You can't actually put it on any Merfolk that you control, which would have been very sweet, but it does still build into the ability of what Merfolks are trying to do. Merfolks in Ixalan block, the blue-green versions of them at least, want to do 2 things. They want to promote a token/go wide strategy, and also a +1/+1 counter strategy. They kind of encompass both. So Forerunner of the Heralds, It still does its job well. It puts +1/+1 counters on itself, and those +1/+1 counters will let it synergize with other like +1/+1 counter lords or others +1/+1 counter synergy cards. So that's all right. It's not anything game breaking. It's not an infinite combo that I know of, but it's cool. Forerunner of the Legion, again, like you said, it's not terribly interesting giving a creature +1/+1 until end of turn. However, it is a card that's going to go straight into Edgar Markov, and that makes it significantly better just because Edgar Markov is so good at just spewing out vampire tokens all over the board, because whenever you cast a vampire, you get a 1/1 vampire token creature put into the battlefield for free, 0 mana cost required. So Forerunner of the Legion, as soon as it enters the battlefield, it's already coming with a vampire token, so it can already use this +1/+1 ability, and just whenever you're just casting a bunch of vampires with Edgar Markov, either in the command zone or on the battlefield, you're going to get a ton of these triggers, more of these triggers easily than the other Forerunners can do. So it is a weaker effect, but in Edgar Markov, I think it's on par with all the other abilities.
All right, let's move on to number 9 on our list, and we have a really interesting enchantment. This is Blood Sun, a little bit reminiscent of Blood Moon, but with some key differences. Not really a jank people out of the game card to the same extent, but can still do some really cool things. So, Tomer, what do you think about Blood Sun as far as Commander is concerned?
So I think it supports a very unofficial archetype, and I call this the budget Magic player archetype. I always build budget commander decks, and the process of building a budget commander deck is you're going to be running lands that are a little bit cheaper than, the $15 fetch lands and the $10 plus shock lands and all that good stuff. You're going to be running your Karus like Boros Garrison, you're going to be running your Guild Gates, you're going to be running your tap lands, basically stuff that works. It's very consistent, but it is slower than other more expensive land bases, and that's the main sticking point here. Blood Sun, what it does, however, is it turns your cheaper land base into one that is fantastic. Basically, your tap lands, like your Orzhov Guildgate, which enters the battlefield tapped, now it enters the battlefield untapped. It's basically a scrub land. I mean, it doesn't have the basic land types, but it enters the battlefield untapped, and you can immediately use it to tap for white or black mana on that turn. So that's fantastic. It gets even better when you run it with Karus, like Boros Garrison. Boros Garrison generally enters the battlefield tapped, and you have to return a land you control to its owner's hand, but it taps for 2 mana. It taps for red and white each time you tap it. Well, now these Karus become these super lands that enter the battlefield untapped. You don't have to return a land to your hand, and they tap for 2 mana right off the bat, and they mana fix. So they become insane. And at the same time, while Blood Sun is making all your budget mana base so good, it's also hurting your opponents if they're playing really expensive mana bases. Suddenly, their fetch lands cannot be sacrificed to find other lands. Suddenly, their Maze of Ith cannot tap and stop your creatures from attacking them. It gets really, really silly, really, really fast. It doesn't shut down all of the more expensive lands. Like, it doesn't stop Cabal Coffers or Gaia's Cradle, but it still shuts down a lot of the really expensive ones. And even beyond that, you can go pretty silly with cards like Lotus Veil or Lake of the Dead. So there's a lot of potential here for Blood Sun.
Yeah, Blood Sun is really cool. I like this card. It's really nice that it draws you a card when it enters the battlefield, which isn't as big of a concern, I guess, in Commander, but it does lower the opportunity cost to play this. Like, you're not spending a card for a card that is very situational. And I think, like you said, it just boosts the power of budget decks very, very high when you have this on the battlefield. I would just warn people, I think you want to be careful about using it as a combo piece, just because the effect is so unique that it's hard to put redundancy in your deck, and if you only have Blood Sun, you're not going to draw it in some matches. But I think it's a great card to just slot into basically any budget deck with red to just make your mana not just as good as your opponent's mana, who's playing fetch lands and shock lands and all that stuff, but maybe even better if you're playing stuff like the bounce land. The bounce lands are just insane with this. When they enter the battlefield untapped, don't make you return a land to hand, and add 2 mana when you tap them. That's a really, really powerful land.
Yeah, I think this card isn't exactly a combo piece. It's more of a quality of life / hate card. It's going to hamper your opponent's better land base, and it's going to make your land base a little bit better. It's not something that I would go out of my way to tutor for all the time, but it's always going to be great to see in my hand when I'm running a budget mana base. And I'm always excited to see when my opponents start complaining that they can't crack their, 10 fetch lands in their 5-color, $500 budget mana base.
And if you draw it on turn 10, after you've already played all your tap lands, you get another card. So there's not even much risk there. So anyway, that's Blood Sun. Let's move on to number 8 on our list. Another enchantment, but this one's a little bit different than Blood Sun. We're talking Dead Man's Chest. This is a really crazy card. When I first read it, I thought this was like a Ganti, where you exiled a bunch of cards and you got to choose one of them. But then someone pointed out that you actually can cast all the cards, which means if you can put it on a big creature and it dies, it's kind of like drawing you 8 cards potentially, or 10 cards, like some huge number of cards. So, Tomer, what do you think of this one? Can you just stuff this in any deck that has a decent amount of removal and generate card advantage, or is it more specific than that?
Honestly, I think so. I think this is a card that is flexible enough that you could just jam it in basically any black deck, and it's going to do some work. Obviously, there's high risk and high reward. First of all, it has to enchant a creature an opponent controls, not a creature that you control. You really want to put it on a bigger creature as opposed to a smaller creature. If you put it on a 2/2, it's not going to do that much. You really want like a creature that is like 4 power or higher than that. So there's obviously a lot of circumstances that you have to check off to make sure that that Man's Chest works well. And then secondly, it needs to die. It can't be bounced. The enchantment can't be destroyed. The creature can't be exiled. It has to die with the aura on top of it. And then after all of that, the cards that you exile and that you get to play with are totally random. You could hit all lands and not be able to cast any spells. But that aside, this is a 2-mana aura, and the upside of it, the potential upside of it, is really, really high. So I think that Man's Chest is going to be a fun card. It's not a very competitive card, but definitely a very fun card with a very high upside, and in certain decks it's also going to be even better. So for example, in an Enchantress deck, and I'm thinking specifically about Daxos the Returned, which is a white-black Enchantress deck, this is an enchantment, it's cheap, it triggers Daxos' ability, puts a loyalty counter on him, and it has also recursion potential and all that good stuff, so I think that's an easy inclusion there. In mono black decks or Gaunty Lord of Luxury, decks that are focused on thievery as its main archetype, this is obviously a no-brainer inclusion because it's a cheap thievery card and it can have a huge upside to it as well. So I think it's just a really fun card.
Yeah, I think this card is super fun. I really love that it's only 2 mana, which means it's not all that impractical that you can put it on a creature and then just immediately Doomblade that creature or something to get the advantage right away. It's not like it's 4 mana or 5 mana where you gotta hope that the turn cycle goes around and nothing goes wrong. So I think that helps minimize the downside. If you can play it and immediately kill the creature, you know you're gonna wrath the board or something. And in that scenario, if your opponent's gonna like bounce their own creature or Path to Exile or Swords to Plowshares their own creature to not give you the trigger, then they're like hurting themselves and they probably don't want to do that. I also like that it's 2 mana because it gives you some sweet like Sun Titan shenanigans. It's easy to reanimate with things that care about converted mana cost. So I think there's a ton of fun stuff you can do with this. Easily an inclusion in stuff like Gaunty or probably like Send Triplets where your goal is to play with your opponent's cards. But I'm excited to just play this in a lot of decks because it seems like really fun. I think you do need a decent amount of removal in your deck. I wouldn't want to play this in a removal light deck and just trust that the creature is going to die eventually. But as long as you're playing...
hope it does.
As long as you're playing a decent amount of removal, I think you can play this in your deck regardless of the theme. Well, let's move on to number 7 on our list, and we have a colorless card. Can go in any commander deck, no matter what you're playing. AZOR'S Gateway, which flips around into a land that made me go wow when I saw it. When I just read the text on this, I was like, oh my god, is that an insane land? Taps for X mana, where X is your life total, and commander, of course. You start with 40 life, plus you gain 5 life, so it's pretty easy to imagine this tapping for 20 mana without much trouble, and even if you're at 1 life when you flip it, you're still getting 6 mana immediately, which is absolutely insane. So, what do you think about AZOR'S Gateway, Tomer? The challenge is actually getting it to flip. Is this too hard to flip to be a really great card, or is it worth the investment because the backside is so good?
Honestly, yes to both. I put it here because this card is obviously very flashy. The flip side wins games very easily. Adding that much mana just means you just choose whatever X spell you want to use to win the game with. You could, if you're in red, you can use Comet Storm to just burn out your opponents. If you're in green, you could Genesis Wave for basically putting your entire library onto the battlefield. Blue Sun Zenith basically starts milling out people. It does silly things, obviously. So the flip side is really, really good. However, flipping it, I think, is going to be a significant challenge in Commander, which is kind of part of the fun. Trying to figure out what are the best and most consistent ways to flip AZOR'S Gateway, and then seeing, in the end, is it worth it? So I think the deck that's going to take the most advantage of this card is going to be Derevi Imperial Tactician. And that card says, whenever Derevi or a creature you control, whenever Derevi enters the battlefield or a creature control deals combat damage to a player, you may tap or untap target permanent. So this means you can have multiple activations of Azor's Gateway per turn, as opposed to just once per turn. Obviously, it also works well Paradox Engine, but then again, everything works well Paradox Engine. But you can see where I'm going with this. You put this in a Derevi deck with Paradox Engine, and you're going to be able to use Azor's Gateway multiple times per turn, and you could probably flip it in a turn or two. And once you do flip it, then you have all the mana, and you kind of just win the game shortly after. So I think it's worth it in certain decks, but you really need to have the right sort of support for it. And I wouldn't run it just willy-nilly without any ways to untap it, because yes, it's a looting effect, but it's not a great looting effect. You're paying 1 mana to do it every single turn. The card gets exiled, and also you have to exile certain cards to make sure it flips. You can't just exile your worst card, because it has to be a different converted mana cost if you want it to flip. So it's not the best looter. You really want it for the flip side, and you really want it in specific decks that can untap it multiple times.
So I think I was a little bit higher on this card than you. To me, this feels like a card I'm pretty happy just slamming into a deck for the looting ability and hoping that eventually I flip it. But then I got worried the more I thought about it that maybe this is one of those cards that paints a pretty big target on your head. Like, the countdown is so slow, taking 5 turns, and your opponent's going to know when it's getting close. So once you get, like, 3 different cards exiled of different converted mana costs, or up to 4 converted mana costs of cards exiled, it feels like the whole table is just going to be like, all right, like, we got to kill this person right now. So I think I didn't think about that at first, and I was like, oh, sure, I'll just play this and hope it works out. But I feel like this is like a gen card. Like, you play this card, and everyone attacks and kills you because it looks really scary, and they don't know. Maybe you can't flip it as easily as your opponents think that you're going to be able to flip it, but it's the kind of card that is going to make people kill you, I think, because the backside is just, it's absurd. The text on the backside is just a ridiculous card in Commander.
Yeah, that is a great point. I also like the fact that Jen has now taken the mantle of Jake. It's like, this is just a Jake card. This is going to get you killed. This is just a Jen card. This is going to get you killed. I guess it's just like the curse of the Jays. But yeah, you bring an excellent point that I totally neglected. This is definitely going to paint a huge target on your back. So basically, when you cast it, you have to be in a mindset to flip it within like a couple turns, or else you're just going to get hated out. Sure, you might not be able to be in a good position to flip it, but your opponents don't know that, and also your opponents can't take that risk. If you do flip the card and you pair it up with an X spell, which you probably do have in your deck because you're running this card, you're going to win the game. And your opponents just cannot allow that to happen. So either Azor's Gateway is going to die before you can flip it, or you're going to die before you can flip it. One or the other. So be wary with this card. But obviously, it's awesome if you do get to flip it, and kudos to you if you get to flip it.
Yeah, it's basically like when I say, "Oh, can I win this turn?" That's what Azor's Gateway says when you cast it. That's the text that all your opponents see on it when it enters the battlefield.
Yeah, everybody drop what you're doing. Let's kill Seth right now.
All right, let's move on. Number 6 on our list, we have a huge commander, ZACAMA Primal Calamity, and this is another really flashy mythic. Untapping your lands, doing a ton of things, huge dinosaur. So first, let me just hear what you think of this card in general. Then I have a specific question about it for you.
I generally have a really high bar on 9 converted mana cost spells. It basically has to say, I win the game, or close to it. Like Omniscience or something like that. It has to enable some sort of huge play that clearly puts you on top of the board. Because yes, we are playing Battlecruiser Magic, but 9 mana is still a ton, even in Commander. What ZACAMA does, though, is still quite impressive. I don't think it wins the game outright, far from it, but the moment it enters the battlefield, my favorite part of it is it does untap all your lands, and it has 3 abilities, 2 of which I find not that great, but one of which I find really good, and that's the green one, the green activated ability, destroy target artifact or enchantment. In Commander, there's no shortage of threatening artifacts or enchantments that you want to be blown up, and the moment you cast ZACAMA, it enters the battlefield, and you can destroy 3 artifacts or enchantments before anybody can really do anything to ZACAMA. So I really like that ability. Outside of it, it is a Vigilance Reach Trampler, so it is a very significant body. It's a good blocker. It's a good attacker. Do I think it's going to win the game? Probably not. It has no innate protection. It could be countered, and then you'll be sad. It could be killed before its enter the battlefield ability triggers, and then, again, you'll be very sad. But at the same time, it's a very flashy dinosaur. It's the most expensive one. It has 3 heads, and I have to give it some credit for that. So,
also, I think this is one of those cards where you get the free value of your opponent not remembering that it has reach and attacking into it with flyers. I know I'll never remember that it has reach. But the other thing I wanted to ask you, Tomer, we now have 2 huge Naya dinosaur legends. So if you're sitting down to build dinosaurs, we got all these sweet new cards for the tribe. Do you go with ZACAMA or do you go with Gishath as your commander for your dinosaur deck?
Oh, it has to be Gishath, unquestionably. I feel like Gishath mentions dinosaurs in its card blocks, and I think that's a good indicator which one should be your commander. But also, I think Gishath just leads to more ways to just win the game outright. Basically, there's a lot of situations right now in the dinosaur deck that if you attack with Gishath and you flip over a bunch of things, and it has haste, by the way, so it can immediately attack. If you get to flip over a bunch of dinosaurs, there are many combinations out there that you just win the game with. You can't say the same with ZACAMA. ZACAMA is good at maybe stabilizing the board by destroying a bunch of problematic artifacts or enchantments, or maybe just picking off some problematic creatures. But at the end of the day, I feel like it just has less of a splash for its mana cost compared to what Gishath has to offer at its mana cost. So I think Gishath is unquestionably the better one.
So can you play ZACAMA in your 99 then if you're playing Gishath? Like, is this...
Oh, you have to.
Okay. All right.
It's a 3-headed elder dinosaur. Like, what are you doing playing dinosaurs if you're not playing the 3-headed elder dinosaur? You have to.
Do you think each head has one ability? Like, one head is the damage one is the gain life head? Is that what's going on?
I think so. I think they also, like, all breathe fire for whatever reason, but one is, like, red fire, one's green fire, and one's white fire. I think it came out of, like, a Power Rangers villain. I don't know.
All right.
It's sweet.
It is sweet. I do like ZACAMA. Well, let's move on to number 5 on our list. Oh, man. This is a card I'm most excited to make my commander. Azor the Lawbringer, the big Sphinx's Revelation on a body. So, Tomer, why don't you talk about this one first, and then I'll gush about it a bit.
So, by the way, Seth, I put this here on this spot because I know you love this card so much. So I wanted to hear you talk about it. So I want to hear, Seth, why do you love this card so much?
Okay, so I love this card because it does exactly what I want to be doing in Commander. If you've ever seen me play Commander, I don't really want to kill people. I'm not really interested in that. I just want to, like, draw cards and stay alive and then eventually do something cool, and maybe that cool thing wins the game, but usually not. And Azor is just perfect for what I want to do. It gains life, so I'm not dying to my opponent's aggressive attackers. It draws me cards, so I get more jank I can cast. The enter the battlefield ability is weird to me. I think it's the way it's worded. I don't think it's as good as it looks, but it is nice that it keeps your opponent from casting sorceries and immediately blowing up. The problem is, like, if your opponent has an instant, they can just kill it in response to the trigger or kill it on your turn before they attack. So it doesn't actually prevent instants. It just really prevents sorceries, and the instant text doesn't really actually do a single thing. It's kind of deceptive. But I just love this card because it just draws me cards and keeps me alive and lets me keep playing Commander for a longer period of time.
I agree with all those things. I mean, it's not going to stop opponents from messing with you on your turn, but what it really does, it says, hey everyone, can you just chill for a bit? I want to go to my next turn, and then Sphinx's Revelation. Leave me alone for a little bit. Just leave my stuff alone. No instants, no sorcerers, no board wipes, no nothing. Just leave me alone. I'm going to Sphinx's Revelation, and then, okay, you can have your fun. So, yeah, that is 100% a Seth card in every single way. Just let me tap out to draw cards, pass the turn, and then when you pass the turn, you're making sure that your opponents can't do as much about, your Lawbringer.
Let's move on to number 4 on our list, and we got more huge legends. GHALTA, Primal Hunger, 12 mana, 12/12, gets cheaper if you have a bunch of power on the battlefield. It also tramples. So, Tomer, is this one a Dinosaur 99 card, or are you playing this as your commander and trying to use it as a way to close out the game?
I mean, I guess you could put it as your commander. I think it's a really, really good card, but the way I was thinking about it was really putting in part of the 99 under Gishath's Son's Avatar if you're playing Dinosaur Tribal, or basically any Stompy deck. Generally, I don't really care for big dumb beaters. This is essentially just a 12/12 Trampler, and it doesn't have any other meaningful ways to interact with the board outside of, punching people in the face really, really hard. And that's admirable, but generally I'm looking for more things out of a commander card. However, I have to really give it to GHALTA Primal Hunger. This card really can be played as a 2-mana 12/12 Trampler, and that is insane. That is value that I just simply cannot deny to us Timmy players. It's a dinosaur. Obviously, it's really good in Gishath's Son's Avatar, but I also think it's also really good in just general Stompy decks. My favorite one being Xenagos, God of Revels, because Xenagos doubles the power and toughness of a creature. Well, doubles the power of it, and gives it haste. GHALTA has Trample, which is something the Xenagos lacks, but really, really appreciates. So in a Xenagos deck, I can totally see it being played as a 2-mana 12/12 Trampler that immediately enters the battlefield, becomes a 24/24 Trampler, and just wrecks people's day. And I think it also just works really well with Xenagos in general, just because Xenagos doubles the power of any other creature. So if you play like a 6/6 creature, Xenagos will make it a 12/12. You attack, post-combat, you now have a 12/12 creature, and you can cast GHALTA for 2 mana. So very consistent way of making it a very, very cheap but very, very expensive threat. Also, another card that I like in red, Sunbird's Invocation. Whenever you cast a card, you essentially cascade. You look at the top of your library until you find a card that is converted mana cost less than it, and you get to cast it for free. GHALTA is a 12 mana spell that you can cast for 2 mana sometimes, so you can dig 12 cards deep and cast like an 11 cost spell, like Live the Dream, maybe cast like an Eldrazi, I don't know. So there's a lot of silliness that can happen with GHALTA. I really like it.
I think the other thing that I really like about GHALTA is I think it has some sneaky value with like Yidris or Rashmi commanders, kind of like Sunbird's Invocation, where you were talking about using it as a big high converted mana cost creature, but doesn't really cost that much mana. So it lets you do some cool tricks with things like Cascade. It's kind of similar to the Sunbird's Invocation trick. So I don't know. Like you, I'm not super excited about just big creatures. I'd rather be Cloud Blazering or Muldriftering than casting 12/12s, even with Trample. But if you like that style of play, this seems like just one of the biggest possible threats for its converted mana cost. And in Commander, it's pretty easy to get this to 2 mana. And that's one of the things I like about it from the command zone is 12-mana commanders are really hard to play. Even 8-mana commanders are hard to play. But that discount is going to keep happening from the command zone. So it kind of gives you a repeatable, as long as you have a board full of random creatures, which you probably should have if you're playing green, that's kind of what green does, it's going to be 2 mana like all the time from your command zone. So your opponent keeps killing it, you just keep casting it for 2 mana every single turn until eventually your opponent runs out of ways of dealing with it, which I think is a nice upside if you're playing some sort of weird mono-green stompy commander deck.
Yeah, and maybe there's even combo potential. Like, I'm already envisioning attacking and drawing 12 cards with, like, Soul's Majesty, or sacrificing it to greater good and then recasting it, or maybe, like, some food chain combo. I don't know. It's silly. And the discount is really, really good, and there are some crazy things you can do with GHALTA. You can play it straight, and that's how I plan on doing it with, like, Xenagos and Gishath, but maybe you even, like, combo off of it. I don't know. It's really, really abusable.
Food chain is very intriguing. I hadn't really thought about that, but that seems like a really easy way to Genesis Wave for your whole deck or something, like a new, unique way to make that happen in your mono green deck with GHALTA as your commander.
Yep.
Well, let's move on. Number 3 on our list, HUATLI, Radiant Champion, the Planeswalker, and oh man, I really love this one too, Tomer. So, Tomer, is this a Planeswalker that you can just stick in your green-white deck, or are you looking for specific strategies? Are you trying to be like a tokens theme or some sort of go-wide theme to really maximize her abilities, or is she good enough just on her own in any green-white deck?
I think it's very specifically go-wide tokens, but in those decks, she is actually fantastic. And the weird thing is, when I was looking online, when I was doing my review, I didn't see a lot of people talking about her, but she looks amazing to me in a go-wide token strategy deck. Yeah, HUATLI Radiant Champion doesn't do anything if you have an empty board state, but again, in a go-wide strategy, you're going to have like 5+ tokens fairly consistently on the board, and at that point, if you have 5 or more tokens on the board, you can play her, immediately +1 her, and if you have 5, for example, you get +1 from her ability, and then you get the loyalty counters from her trigger. You're at 9 loyalty counters, and you're already set up to ultimate her, and that emblem is insane in tokens, because it's not whenever you cast a creature, it's whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you draw a card, your opponents cannot interact with that emblem, and for the rest of the game, you're drawing cards like a madman. You put down like 3 tokens with Elspeth's Son's Champion, you draw 3 cards, and you just keep going from there. You just draw out your deck, and you have everything available to you at all times. It's silly. And even if your opponents are going to try their best to stop her from ultimating, which they should, she just has so much loyalty. She's going to be soaking up so much damage. Just like kind of like Gideon Marshall Paragon, or whichever the one was from like Ravnica, Gatecrash. She can take such a beating. Like it's hard to kill her. And even her -1 ability is also very powerful. Like it can be a finisher even if you don't get to that ultimate. Or if you ultimate and then you still have her around, you can just start using her as a finisher herself. She is really good.
Yeah, I think that HUATLI, I agree with you. It's got to be played in a specific deck, but in that deck, it seems like just an absurd card. I can't remember the name of it now, but there was a green enchantment from Unstable that let you choose flavor text or no flavor text, and then you drew a card whenever that thing entered the battlefield. And I remember talking about it. I was like, they can't print that card in regular Black Border Magic because it's too good with tokens. Just drawing a card whenever a token enters the battlefield seems so powerful. And that's basically what HUATLI is with Suspend 1. Like, you have a bunch of tokens, 1+ gets her to ultimate, and then your Secure the Waste is actually a Sphinx's Revelation, along with being a Secure the Waste. Then your Lingering Souls is not just Lingering Souls, it's an opportunity as well. Like, it is so insane what you can do once you get that emblem on the battlefield, and you can't deal with emblems. There's no way to really get rid of an emblem, and most likely you'll have enough creatures if you're playing a go-wide deck that you'll keep her around after ultimating, and then you just fireball in a creature and an opponent every turn with a -1, or even ultimate her again, and then you're drawing 2 cards, and it is a May ability, so you don't mill yourself out. Like, this card seems insane to me in tokens. This makes me want to build a token deck specifically to abuse HUATLI, because it just seems like the best thing you can be doing in a deck like that.
Yeah, I think this ranks up there in terms of support stables, tokens deck, like just like Doubling Season is, just like Parallel Lives is. HUATLI Radiant Shape is just as good as those, in my opinion, as those cards for the tokens deck.
And she's in the right colors with Doubling Season, with Parallel Lives, with Anointed Procession. Like, you can play all the token doublers, be straight green-white tokens, and just do absurd things. Well, let's move on. Number 2 on our list, ETALI Primal Storm. And I don't know about this one, Tober. I think you like this card maybe more than I do, which is weird because it kind of draws you cards, but I was kind of meh on this one. So what do you think about ETALI Primal Storm?
All right, so yeah, this is probably a pet card. I love it, and that's why it's this high up on the list. This is just cards that I love. But I actually think ETALI is pretty good. It's a 6-mana 6/6, and whenever it attacks, you exile the top card of each player's library, and then you get to cast any number of non-land cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost. You get them for free. So you get a whole bunch of card advantage that you immediately cast for no extra mana, and I think this is just a generally good card to be casting, but there's so much more room to build upon this. So I think the biggest comparison people say is, oh, this is like a bad Mind's Dilation. Mind's Dilation is a 7-mana blue enchantment that does something similar. On each person's turn, the first card they cast triggers this ability that you can you exile the top card of their library, and you can cast a non-land card for free without paying its mana cost if it is a non-land card. Kind of similar, but the difference is ETALI gets all those spells, all those triggers of each person every single time you attack, so all at once, and it also targets your own library. So not only is that more potential to hit spells because it's targeting yourself, but you can also set up some really sweet plays with some top deck manipulation. You can scroll rack a really expensive or really good spell from your hand on top of your library. Sylvan Library also does top deck manipulation. Sensei's Divining Top also does top deck manipulation. So you can kind of make sure that you're hitting really, really good spells off the top of your own library, let alone your opponent's stuff. It happens every single time it attacks. It doesn't actually have to deal combat damage, so being chump blocked is fine. It synergizes really well with extra combat steps like Seize a Day. You can make it attack again and also get its trigger. It works obviously really well with Strionic Resonator, which you can copy the trigger. And so I find it just really, really good in a bunch of different styles of play. Xenagos, God of Revels, obviously I really like because it gives it haste, immediately attacks, and it gets some good value while swinging for 12 damage. I think it's a dinosaur, so it's great in Gishath's Son's Avatar. And I also think it's kind of neat in Storm-style decks, kind of like Yidris, because it does potentially cast like 4 or so spells each turn, and that adds to the Storm count. So that could be really fun.
I think the more I hear you talk about it, the more I'm becoming sold on how good it can actually be. So I think if you consider when you build a commander deck, a lot of times you're close to 50% mana, including lands and then your mana rocks and stuff. With 4 players, you're going to draw on average 2 cards, and not just draw them, but get to cast them for free, which actually is a lot of value. Of course, there's a lot of variance. You might hit random mana rocks and stuff, assuming you're not doing the manipulate the top of your deck thing. But sometimes you're going to get random like Eldrazi or 8 mana things or Planeswalkers. So being a 6/6 for 6, it's already kind of on curve, and then it's just kind of upside. So actually, the more you talk about it, the more I actually like it. Do you think this is a commander card, being your general, your commander, or is it more of a 99 card that you just play for its value-y triggers?
I think it's fine as a commander, but if you're looking for a commander in red that kind of plays cards off your opponent's library, I think we have a better version of that with Grenzo Havoc Razor. It does a similar thing. It only plays cards off your opponent's library, not your own, but it still fills that niche pretty well and is a lot cheaper. I think that's just a better option. But I think ETALI is going to be great in the 99 of a lot of decks.
Speaking of storming off, we have number 1 on our list, Storm the Vault, which flips around into Vault of Catlacan. So, Tomer, I know that you think this card is just insane. Like, this is the card that you think is most broken from the set, right? Or potentially broken.
I think so. Like, this is not a top 10 most powerful cards, but I think this card is probably the strongest of the bunch. Yeah.
So with this card, obviously you need a decent amount of artifacts, or I guess you can play it without artifacts, but you flip it faster if you make artifacts. Do you have anything specific in mind for this card, or do you just play this in a blue-red deck and trust that you're going to have some creatures, you're going to get some treasures, or do you really got to build around it to maximize its power?
Okay, so there's one card, or one deck that I have in mind specifically for Storm the Vault, and it's this underpowered deck. It's not really popular at all. I'm sure you haven't really heard of it before. Have you heard of Brea, Ethereum Shaper?
Who's Brea?
It's this terrible artifact general, 4 colors. Nobody plays it. Really underpowered. What she does is she's 4 colors, artifacts in blue and red. In case you don't know the colors. She enters the battlefield with 2 artifact creatures. She has like some combo potential with her and control potential, but it's not really good. Don't worry about it. But I think Storm the Vault might be the thing that makes her viable. It's really trivial for Storm the Vault to flip in Brea because she's an artifact deck, so she's going to have a bunch of mana rocks. She's not in green, so she has no land ramp potential with like ramp and growth and stuff like that. She's going to be running a lot of mana rocks. Probably the time you cast Storm the Vault, you're already going to have 5 or more artifacts, and Brea herself counts as 3 when she enters the battlefield, so it's going to flip immediately. And then you have this terrible vintage restricted card called Tolarian Academy. And it taps for blue for each artifact you control. Again, you're in an artifact deck, so you're going to have like 6 or more when it flips easily without even trying. And then just in case you lose all your artifacts, it also taps like a command tower. So it's all right, I guess. But I think it's pretty good, and it's going to make this Brea lady kind of good, I guess. I think.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen we've seen in Ixalan Block all these flip lands that are either like directly old lands or similar to older lands that were powerful, and I'm pretty sure that Tolarian Academy is just the most busted of the bunch. Like, all of them are good, but Tolarian Academy is just insane because it's so easy to get cheap artifacts on the battlefield. So not only is it easy to flip, but then you have crazy combo potential where you just make so much mana. It's pretty incidental to combo off with artifacts because you just flood the board with artifacts. You can play random egg type artifacts that draw you cards and just go crazy that way. So I think this card is really, really good, and I really like that it does something even when you're not ready to go off. Like, if everything goes wrong, you're still getting treasure tokens. It's giving your blue-red deck some incidental ramping while you're getting in with your creatures, which isn't a bad thing. So even the front half, I don't know if you'd play it for the front half, but the fact that it's doing something that's relatively good even before you flip it around is definitely a nice bonus. Like, getting a treasure every time you deal combat damage, that is a fine thing to do in your blue-red deck. Plus, that's not even counting, it's an artifact, so you have the artifacts energy. So yeah, I think this card is really, really good. I could definitely imagine playing this in a lot of blue-red decks because you have the mana rocks. You're already playing 10 mana rocks or something in your deck, and that's not including any other random artifacts. Solemn Simulacrums, you're playing maybe some equipment. So you don't really have to go that far towards building around this to accidentally flip it around pretty consistently. And then even if you're tapping for 3 mana or 4 mana and not going completely crazy and tapping for 10 mana or 20 mana or something, that's still just a really good land.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, snark aside, I think this card is going to see a good deal of play. I mean, Tolarian Academy is vintage restricted for a reason. It taps for a lot of mana. And like you said, I don't think you need to be in a dedicated artifact deck for it to be great. I think it's going to be the best in a dedicated artifact deck like Brea. However, even if you're in a aggressive creature-focused deck that is in blue and red, for example, like Marchesa, the Black Rose, it's going to generate a lot of mana for you. And then when it flips, even if you don't have any other artifacts in play, you play Storm the Vaults and you make 5 treasure tokens and get it to flip that way. Your Vault of the Catlacan, as long as your treasure tokens are in play, it's still tapping for 5 mana each time, which is still bonkers. I don't think it's going to like break open the competitive scene or anything. It's still a 4 mana enchantment. The sticking point with this is it only flips at your end step, so you can't basically play Storm the Vault and immediately get maximum value out of it as soon as it enters the battlefield. You have to usually wait a turn. Unlike Tolarian Academy, which is broken largely because you can go like turn 1, I drop all my mana rocks, and then I tap immediately for like 6+ mana and win the game. Storm the Vault is more like, okay, it's a 4 mana investment for the next turn, and then I go insane. So it's not crazy busted, but it is incredibly powerful, and I can see it as a staple in all Brea decks. All blue-red artifact decks in general are going to love this card, and also in aggressive decks that can just flip it easily. Marchesa, non-green decks, pirate decks, for example. This is going to be really sweet.
And plus, like, we were talking about another flip card that flips into a crazy land earlier in AZOR'S Gateway, and this is just significantly easier to flip. Like,
so much
it's not
easier.
Maybe as flashy as the add mana equal to your life total as far as the text on it, but it takes a lot less work to get Storm of the Vault into Vault of Catlacan than it takes to flip in AZOR'S Gateway.
And I think it also is just more relevant on its flips on its non-flipped side. Just like getting treasure tokens is useful, more useful, I would say, than paying one to loot-ish, I would say.
Yeah, it's probably true. So, well, there you have it. That brings us to the end of our top 10 Rivals of Ixalan cards for Commander.
Very short. Very short
It was a
video.
short. No matter how long we try to make it, it always ends up about an hour. No matter every time.
It's gonna be. We say it's gonna be half an hour. We're gonna keep it half an hour, guys.
Well, Tomer, thanks so much for hanging out and doing it. It's always a blast.
Thanks for having me.
And big thanks to everyone for watching. So we'll have some more of these coming up with Standard and with Modern. So keep an eye out for that. And if you want a more in-depth discussion of Rivals of Ixalan for Commander, make sure to check out Tomer's article, 2-part article series going up on the site soon. So anyway, thanks again for watching, everyone, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.